Welcome back to Capital Time. I'm Tim Boyum. Tonight we're bringing you our one-on-one conversations with the candidates vying to be North Carolina's next Commissioner of Agriculture. You just heard from Republican incumbent Steve Troxler. Now here's my conversation with Democratic candidate Sarah Tabor. First of all, it's so good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. First of all, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. My name is Sarah Tabor. I've worked in agriculture for 27 years. Got my start at the age of 14, professionally working other people's farms, just hands-on manual labor field jobs. I was very fortunate to be able to work my way up in agriculture, work my way through crop school. And once I was done, had a doctorate in crop science, I also had those years of hands-on experience and just kind of put my shingle out and said, hey, if you are a farmer and you want to grow things that are going to make you more money, they're more challenging. Usually when people want to make more money with their farm, it's because they're already in financial distress. So you can't spend years on trial and error. You got to stick that landing right away. No pressure. So we worked with farmers to make sure, they were growing higher value crops that were going to pay their bills the way they needed to. And they got it done, right the first time. Also started working with folks who'd never been farming at all before, who wanted to get started on things that are a little bit more challenging, usually fruits and vegetables. And every single one of my farmers is still in business. So I'm very proud of having been able to walk people through that process many times.
So working in agriculture and running for public office are obviously two very different things. The jobs are different, although a lot of what you do probably would fit under the category of this department too. But why make the decision to do this and run?
Sure. I mean, again, had some really good success working one-on-one with farmers, but it's slow, and you see how many more people need that same kind of, assistance and outreach. And you also have your farmers running into the same problems over and over again, and it starts to feel like Groundhog Day just a little bit. And so when that's happening, you start to think maybe we need to go up the chain a little bit and address some of these bigger issues. Some of the biggest ones were people just didn't have there's not a lot of financial transparency in agriculture. And so being able to do something about that, make sure that people have really good access to info about budgets, how they can plan out their farm, what they can expect if they try a new crop. That's really important because you can't make good decisions for yourself if you don't have the basic financial transparency to move in the right direction. And another one is just access to capital.
Obviously, Steve Troxler's been in office for a long time. Is it that you want to be in office, or you don't think Steve Troxler is doing the proper job? Where does that sort of fit in with everything with your run for office?
I'm not really focused on who's in the job. I'm just focusing on what needs to be done, right? So again, I was seeing a lot of things that need to be done for North Carolina farmers to thrive, and it wasn't happening. So I'm not really too focused on who the person currently is in office. I'm focused on what needs to get done.
A lot of people in this state don't realize agriculture still is the biggest economic engine in this state, but farmers are struggling in a lot of ways, not just with, weather and whatnot, but, the aging population and the shrinkage of farms in the state and the acreage. What is your concern level with that in terms, especially with the growth that the state is seeing?
Sure, yeah. So North Carolina is currently leading the country in farmland loss. That's one of the things that kind of thought we need some help here. The reason for that farmland loss, the only state that's losing more raw acreage than us is Texas, and they have so much more to start with, right? That is often blamed on there's so many people moving into this state. I don't think that's right, and I'll tell you why. We're leading the country in farmland loss, one or two, depending on how you count it, but we're only 8th or 9th in population growth. So if it were the number of people moving in, there'd be a lot of states ahead of us in line in terms of farmland loss, and that's not where we're at. As someone who works with farmers on their business, I looked at some business issues. I did the math, and I found that the farmers in our state, here in North Carolina, can make as little as half as much money per acre as their peers in Georgia and Virginia. That's why farmers sell their land. If they can't make money on their crops, they're going to make money selling one last crop, and it's houses, right? And so that's what we need to be focused on, is not, oh, there's so many people coming in here, because that's not the problem. The problem is our farmers aren't making enough money. And if we can blame it on development, we don't have to take responsibility for how our leadership has led us down this path. So again, I'm really focused on, my job is making farmers more money. Let's find crops that are going to be a better fit for us. The things we're growing right now, corn, soy, even tobacco, does not make as much money nearly as it used to. There's a reason we used to grow these crops and focus on them, but that time has passed. We have a lot different opportunities. In fact, we have really good opportunities to grow things that make a ton more money. But if we're not pursuing them, because farmers don't have the financial transparency to know what's a better bet for them, it's not going to happen, and they're going to wind up selling.
We have much more to get to with Sarah Tabor. We got to take a quick break. The rest of our conversation on the other side. Welcome back to Capitol Tonight. I'm Tim Boyum. Tonight we're talking to the candidates vying to be North Carolina's next Commissioner of Agriculture. Here's the rest of my conversation with Democratic candidate Sarah Tabor. A lot of farms are all over the state, but down east in particular, there's a lot of farms, and they've had to handle their fair share of storms over the past several years. What is your level of concern with that? And is there anything the state can do to try to deal with this, I guess, is the best way to say it, because it seems these storms are going to keep coming with this torrential amount of rain that drops with these storms.
Sure, yeah. Every part of the country has something, that happens, right? In a lot of parts of the country, they have very late and very early frost, so they just have a tiny short growing season. We don't have that problem. A lot of parts of the country, they have droughts every single year. We had kind of our first big one in a long time just now. A lot of places have wildfires all the time. Every place has got its own particular set of issues. That is ours, right? Flooding and hurricanes. There are a lot of things you can do. Number one, have good flood control. We've been underinvesting in that for a long time. We've made it easier for people to build over wetlands, which is going to lead to more flooding when it rains, right? So that, I think, is an issue that we have just opened the lid on. There's still some time to put that back in the jar, right? So that's something we should be paying attention to if we want our farms to thrive. Another is, we know that our flooding is concentrated in the latter half of the summer, in the early fall, right? There's a lot of crops that ripen before that. So by the time the flooding happens, they've already been picked and harvested. We're already kind of focusing on blueberries. They're a great example of that. But there's a lot of things that kind of harvest in that first half of the summer that we could put a little bit more acreage on. We don't have to go all in on those, but they do provide some balance. Not every part of the state gets flooded every single year. We have to kind of keep in mind this is likely to happen about every so often. And so make sure that we have crops that can tolerate about that amount and have a good balance of things that are harvested earlier, harvested later to make sure that we're prepared for that.
One last question. You've talked a lot about financial transparency. What does that look like for you if you're elected?
Sure. So there's a fair amount of financial information that's already put out by NC State and NCA&T. I find that a lot of farmers don't know that it's out there. They don't know it's available, and they don't know how to use it. We'll say, here's a crop budget. Here's how much it will cost. But, what if you have to drill a well? Not every farm has to do that. What if you have to buy new equipment? Not every farm has to do that, right? So I find that a lot of farmers either don't know the budgets are out there, or they don't necessarily know how to use it or how to line it up with their own operation, kind of like tweak it and make sure that they can use that to make a good prediction. But again, the first thing is just making sure that they know that it's there. I've talked with a lot of farmers and said, hey, corn and soy is going to make you this much per acre. Tobacco tends to make you this much. This is why people like it. But did you know there's a lot of fruit and veggies that will make you far more than tobacco, and people are shocked. They don't know that basic amount. So they wouldn't even be looking up the financial info if they don't know the basics, that there's far much more money to be made out there. So I think that's leadership's job, is to make sure that people know there are better options. I don't think necessarily the job is to just collect accolades from folks who are already doing business. You also need to make sure that people know there are new options. The market is very different than it was 20 years ago. Our weather is changing in a way where we have a nice, long, warm, dry season in spring, which is tough for crops we already grow, but it's great for fruits and veggies that make more money. California is where we're used to getting those things from. And so we're used to thinking we can't compete with California. Well, our weather is getting better for those, and they're running out of water and land, right? So we're in a very different situation than we were 20 years ago. So just having leadership that talks about that, and just those very simple points, and you got to say stuff over and over again for it to kind of become part of the common knowledge, right? But just getting those basics out so people know we have better options. We know to look for the information. We know how to make use of that and apply it to ourselves. It's just key.
Well, it's one of the most important positions that a lot of people don't even realize as much about, and how much important agriculture is. So we appreciate everybody running for office. We appreciate your time tonight. Good to see you. Good luck.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
All right, that's going to do it for tonight. As always, if it's on Jones Street or Main Street, fun right here in Capitol Tonight. Stay safe. Look after each other. We'll see you right back here.